Hey, everybody. Nice to be with you once again. Thanks for showing up. We're entering a new season now, going back to school. Businesses are revving up once again. Some of us are moving from one place to another. And it's an important and poignant moment to think about the changes in our lives and how we're making them. It's one thing to make a change logistically, but how we're holding it spiritually is entirely another. Course in Miracles tells us that it takes great maturity to recognize that all change is helpful. And so today I'd like to reframe with you the transitions in our lives and cast them in a new light where they all empower us instead of tend to debilitate us because we put ourselves down. Now, some of us have been through many relationships, multiple marriages. We may change jobs, move around, go from one spiritual path or teacher to another. And we may tend to put ourselves down, criticize ourselves, we berate ourselves for not being able to stick with one thing for a lifetime. But we're living in very accelerated times. And I think there was some statistic that 100 to 200 years ago, most people never went beyond like 10 miles of their hometown. But this is a very rapid time of change. So it's almost as if evolution is speeded up exponentially, and we're going through many lifetimes in one, you might say. Now, a lot of us have had marriages that didn't last a lifetime, and we may feel guilty because we didn't go till death do us part. But the death of the body is only one form of death. There are many forms of death. And relationships have lifespans too. They have a beginning, a middle, and an ending. And the ending doesn't always correspond with the ending of a physical life. Sometimes it does, but often it doesn't. So if you end a relationship purposely and consciously with love where possible, death did you part, but it was a conscious death rather than an unconscious one. In some of my workshops, I ask the participants, why did your marriage fail? And I get pretty common answers. Well, we grew apart, married at a young age. I was not very conscious of what I was doing. He cheated or I cheated. We weren't happy with each other. And then I tell them it was a trick question. Because why do you assume that just because your marriage ended, it failed? Ending does not always equate with failure. In fact, even if you made a mistake in ending it, you can learn so much from the ending that it turns out to be a spiritual success. Course in Miracles tells us that what you judge to be some of your greatest triumphs are really ego triumphs, and they're spiritual failures. What you judge to be your failures are really spiritual successes because you learned from them. So there's an old Chinese saying, when your horse dies, get off. And a lot of us have tried to stay in our horse long after it died. And how many people have I heard tell me, well, the marriage was really over 3 or 5 or 10 years ago, but I just stayed in it beyond its expiration date. Well, it's all okay. You learn from it all. But wouldn't it be nice if we could, A, be sensitive to when things want to shift naturally and organically, and B, when they do, handle them gracefully? Now, I've had lots of relationship breakups, and I've had tenants, and I've had employees that I had to let go of. What I've discovered after lots of trial and error is that it's not what you're doing that counts, it's how you do it. And it's always possible to end with love and dignity and integrity. As George Bernard Shaw said, great is the art of beginning, but even greater is the art of ending. it's easy to fall into love with somebody or fall into marriage or fall into bed. That, a lot of people do that real easily, but how you get out of the marriage or the relationship or out of bed is another story. And if you can do it as an advanced spiritual being instead of somebody who's unconscious and just kind of fumbling around, that's going to be a real mark of integrity. You're going to grow so much through doing it properly, even more than if it continued. And sometimes people say, well, I would have been so much better if I stayed in a marriage for a lifetime. Well, guess what? They're just different kinds of lessons. There are wonderful lessons from long-term lifetime marriages. There are also wonderful lessons from relationship breakups or divorces. And I've had lots of people tell me, well, I got divorced a while back, hard divorce. Been out of the dating scene for quite a while now. And I'm thinking about getting back in, but I'm really afraid I'm going to recreate the same situation. And I asked them, are you the same person who married that first partner? Well, no, I'm not. Are you the same person who was in that marriage? No, I've gone. Did you learn a lot? Oh, yes. Did you learn all through ending the marriage? Oh, yes, I did. And so what I do is I reframe the entire experience as a huge learning experience that propelled you to stand on higher ground where you now are. And if you learn from it, then you're not the same person. If you learn from it, you will not do the same mistakes. And so I'm encouraging people to recognize that the learning curve is empowering. In fact, you learned a lot more through ending it than you did through beginning it. And so maybe we can be gentler with ourselves, go easier on ourselves. Maybe we can just allow life to take its course naturally. One of my favorite phrases about relationships is a reason, a season, or a lifetime. I think I've done a video on this already, where everything exists either for a reason, a momentary intersection, or there's a season of 3 or 5 or 10 or 20 years where you're married to somebody, or there's a lifetime relationship. And the idea is to let each one of those formats be what it is without trying to turn it into something else. If you try to turn a season into a lifetime, it's not going to work. If you try to turn a lifetime into a season, it's not going to work. And so you have to be in it until you've graduated from it, rather than either forced it one way or the other or run away. So in graduate school, I was on a committee that planned these weekend retreats for college students, and they were human relations, interpersonal communication retreats. Go take a bunch of kids away to a camp and connect with each other. It was very nice. And there was always this discussion on the planning committee about, should we have a large number of shorter sessions or a smaller number of longer training sessions? And then the professor would always cite a certain study that said that more work gets done at the beginning or the ending of a session than in the middle. So for that reason, it's to your advantage to have a larger number of shorter sessions and a smaller number of longer sessions. And I learned this myself when I started traveling, because when I was about to take off on a 2 or 3 or 4 week trip, I would there would always be a flurry of activity. I have to finish a lot of stuff, make phone calls, clean stuff up, pay bills, etc. And then when I came home, there would be things that were waiting for me to do, and there were projects I wanted to initiate. And so there's always a flurry of activity and movement and growth around the new beginning. So those beginnings and endings served me more than if there were longer periods in between them. And so what if you're not a failure because you've had lots of relationships? But what if you were courageous enough to dive into many relationships and learn from them and grow through them, even though there would be ups and downs and hard times and joyful times? And so when people tell me now that I'm dating, they say I'm dating, I say, well, you're not just dating, you're not gathering dates, you're gathering data. They'll say, well, I went out with one guy and he was no good, and I went out with somebody else and with no fun. And I said, well, with each of those dates or short relationships, you learned things that empowered you to make a better choice in the long run. I said, oh, yes, I did. I would do that again. I said, well, let's sell it. So you have to be grateful for every date, even if it's a bad date, every relationship, even if it's a short relationship, every marriage, even if it's a short marriage. Don't discount it. This is the ego. The ego is the part of your mind that wants to discount stuff. Say, oh, it was a mess and it was a wreck. I never should have done. No. If you did it, you did it for a reason. In fact, I hear some people talk about my early marriage. They said it was my practice marriage. I was married to somebody for a couple of years and it didn't work. Years went by, I married somebody, now it's sticking. And they say that was my practice, my practice marriage. So if you had a practice marriage, don't say it was a waste of time. I just, I kind of cringe when people say, oh, that marriage was a waste of time. No marriage was a waste of time if you learned from it. If you didn't learn from it, it was a waste of time. But even so, you're going to learn from it eventually. So even if you haven't put the pieces together and figured it out, you will. I am figuring stuff out now 20, 30 years later, stuff that I did, mistakes I made. I had no idea while I was doing it at the time. But now as I've matured and grown, I can see, wow, that's why I did that. That was a mistake. I wouldn't do that again. And so eventually you will figure everything out. I promise you. In fact, A Course in Miracles tells us a happy outcome to all things is sure. A happy outcome to all things is sure. Even the hardest relationship, even the worst relationship, even if the person passed away without resolution, even if you pass away without resolution, it's not the end. Because we are spiritual beings and life goes on, relationship goes on, love goes on. There's a famous medium named Matt Fraser, and he has a wonderful workshop called Love Never Dies, which means that even if somebody passes on, the love remains and the communication remains, and you're still in it with a person. They've just up-leveled to a higher vibration instead of a physical vibration only. So I promise you that you will make sense and peace and healing of all your relationships, whether they were short or long, just a fling or a marriage. In the great jigsaw puzzle of life, somehow it all fits together. And just because you don't see how it fits in a moment doesn't mean it fits. It just means you don't see how it fits in the moment. Now, if you change jobs after 5 or 10 years and you get another job, you're going to say, why did that job fail? Well, it didn't fail. I just completed at that business. I was ready for something else. Well, then why would you say a marriage failed? And so the theme for today is how to bless all changes and then also not be afraid to make new changes. We can regret bad changes, but you can also bless previous changes. And you can also dive into a new job, a new living situation, a new relationship, a new marriage, and say, wait a minute, I am not the person I was, so I'm doing it fresh. There's a famous story you've probably heard me tell before, but it's worth telling again, that in the 1950s, there's a woman who was shopping in an open-air market in Nice, France, and she saw a man who looked like Pablo Picasso. And she asked him, are you Picasso? Yes, I am. Oh my God, you're my favorite painter. I can't believe I'm meeting you in person. Oh. And she saw he had a sketch pad in his hand. She said, well, I know this is kind of audacious, but would you be willing to do a sketch of me? I'll pay you whatever you like. And he looks her up and down. Says, okay. So they go off to a sidewalk cafe and he sits and he's sketching her, and she's swooning, and this is unbelievable. And after 15 minutes, he turns the sketch around and shows her, oh my God, a Picasso. I can't believe it. It's the greatest day of my life. It's a miracle. Thank God. She says, now what do I owe you? He said, well, that'll be $5,000. And this was 1959, so you can multiply that by at least 10 by now. She said, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry, sir, but I had no idea you would charge that much." She said, "But if I may, with all due respect, it only took you 15 minutes. And Picasso looks her in the eye and says, "No, my dear, you do not understand. It took me 80 years and 15 minutes." Meaning that everything that ever happened to him in his life led to that moment, all of his divorces and illnesses and depressions or whatever happened to Picasso in his entire lifetime, all of that experience was imbued in his current work. That's what made it so valuable. So I want to suggest to you too that all of your experience, relationships, jobs, health, friendship, financial, is imbued in who you are at this moment. Everything you do at this moment is the gift that you're giving to the world because of all the gifts the world has given to you through your 20, 40, 60, or 80 years of experience, whatever that is. So, can we bless it all? Can we say it's all good? There's another lesson from A Course in Miracles that says, "Today I will let all things be exactly as they are." In other words, I will let my life be exactly as it is, as it was. I will call it perfect, even though the things that didn't seem perfect at the time, they may not even seem perfect now. But what if it was perfect? What if that 2-year marriage was perfect? What if that 2-year job was perfect? What if that one date was perfect? Wow, the psychic burden at that. There's another Zen phrase that goes, "You have no idea the weight you are carrying until you let it go." Mostly referring to psychic weight. So this idea of I should have done this better, I messed up, I didn't stay with him for a lifetime. Oh, that's a huge psychic weight. Oh, do you know how much energy that depletes from your soul to have the kind of regret or self-judgment? That's 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 much worse than ending a marriage. I can promise you that. And so can we go easy on ourselves and just bless and approve of, and not just approve of, but celebrate it. Thank you, God, for that marriage. Thank you for that divorce. Thank you for that new relationship. Oh, wow. This is a fun ride. I'm on a great adventure, as we all are. Okay. So I want to remind you that I'm starting a new program at the end of September. It's an online course and webinar series called The Time of Your Life. And what we're going to do in this series is reinvent our relationship with time so we discover we have enough of it. So, there's time wealth and there's time poverty. And if you feel like you don't have enough time to do all the things you want to do, so it's not about doing more, but it's about shifting your mindset. There's going to be a major 4-month mindset shift on making friends with time and letting it empower you instead of disempower you. And so you go to my website, alancohen.com. We'd love to see you starting on September 27th. Okay, I always like to end with a moment of deep knowing. So if you close your eyes with me for a moment, take a breath. Thank you, Great Spirit, for all of my life. All of my relationships have come to me by grace, my jobs, my living situations. This is a fantastic adventure. So I'm now willing to lovingly release myself from any judgment about beginnings and endings. I claim perfection. I see myself as innocent. I'm a good person. I'm a wholehearted person. I made mistakes, but yes, I've learned from them. So I open now and I pray and affirm that all new steps I take this season, all coming seasons, that I drop into my deep self and I allow myself to be guided. I trust that all my decisions are blessed, including the ones that seem to be mistakes. I can move forward with confidence, self-trust, and faith in the big picture that somehow my life is unfolding perfectly and that somehow, on the biggest level, all is well. Thank you, God, for all the changes in my life. I'm making the most of them, coming home to love a little more every day. And so it is.